Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Kyle.
Hello, hello.
All right, here we go. Carter, take us away. All right, very good. Hey, thank you. Hi, guys. Good evening, everybody. The item that you have in front of you tonight regarding the telecom franchise is really meant to be a discussion about, in response to, I should say, some of the conversation that council has had with citizens, in particular, former councilor Ingebretson came not too long ago and brought up some concerns that she's run into, as well as with regard to some of the conversation brought forward by Blue Peak, who was a guest here not too long ago as well. We hope to be able to give you some insight with regard to some of the allowances that the franchise provides as it relates to our work with the telecom folks and what citizens can do and those kinds of things when they run into problems. Both Mr. Brower and Mr. Nelson here have worked together to put together some information for purposes of filling you in and giving you the opportunity to ask questions as well. And if you have further direction that you'd like us to pursue, we are open to that also. So with that, if I could turn some time over to Mr. Brower to walk us through, and then of course, Eric here can fill you in on a number of details as well. Mr. Brower.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. Nice to be here this evening. It's about 2022 when all the franchise agreements started with all the fiber optic placement throughout town for all the residences. And as such, the city has issued franchise agreements with the different companies that do this work. And the franchise agreements basically, fancy word for licenses, gives them a license to be able to put their franchise, their fiber optic cables within the city right of way. So city right of way basically includes kind of back a walk to back a walk, but it also includes those areas where we have a public right of way or public easement for utilities. So those are typically 10 to 15 feet behind the sidewalk. And in some locations where we have alleys, those right of ways are in the alleys. And so again, it allows them to install these wherever they want within the right of ways. And Eric can get more into the legal technicalities if you want to, but Wallace gave me quite a bit of information this morning, additional information on that there has been, litigation in Wyoming about this, where the city cannot basically police these. We can't force or go in there if somebody doesn't do it right and do it ourselves and then back charge them. Furthermore, it's governed by the FCC and some federal laws. Now, the interesting part is many of those laws are 20, 30 years old. And so I don't know if they ever really anticipated there would be, say, this level of fiber optic installation that's going on. Right now, when somebody's putting in fiber optics, they come to the city engineering department and they present a plan. Say, hey, we're planning up in the Valley Hills neighborhood to install these, and here we're going to put them right behind the sidewalk. And so at that point, city staff looks at the plan and says, hey, do we have easements in that location, a right-of-way easement where they can put these in? And generally looks for general conformance with our standards. And then we issue a permit to them at no cost, which is part of the franchise, to allow them to install these. As they're going along and problems occur, then undoubtedly people have called the city. On average, throughout the year, we get about 5 calls per week. During the construction season, like right now, through October, we get up to like 15 phone calls a week where we address this. And we encourage people, because of the nature of the franchise agreement, we encourage people to work them out with Blue Peak or whatever company that's possibly impacting them to call into them, get a number assigned to it, what their problem is, and get that addressed. Oftentimes, if people have a challenge or a problem, and we encourage them to call us and to try and facilitate that. The franchise agreement calls for literally an informal resolution to this. So informally, Andrew in the engineering department as a rapport and cell phone numbers for all these people that do this work. So if he identifies something that's going on in a problem, he notifies them as well. Hey, would you check on Mr. Smith on the corner of whatever and verify this problem, and tries to expedite that process along and keep it moving. If they're non-responsive at all, then the agreement does give us more formal action to go after insurance or to enforce more of the hand of the franchise companies. But again, the franchise is very limited on the scope and nature of what the city can do without necessarily policing authorities and then limited authority from the FCC. And so at this point, we put together the last page of the memo is what I affectionately call a one-pager. And it was supposed to be something that you as council or we as staff could email to people if they're upset with the process. And it basically says, hey, what's going on? We're installing fiber optics. Why? Who is this governed by? And then there's a barcode or a thing you can scan there, gives you contact information for all the companies. So you can contact the companies. Then it also gives you the phone number from the city engineering department. If you continue to have problems, you can contact the engineering department. And then ultimately you can go to the state, PSC, Public Service Commission, if you're not getting proper resolution. So we have had challenges. We've had 9 city utilities that have been struck by these borings. It's interesting because people, well, they knew they hit them or they could feel it. But when you're boring these with that big piece of equipment, you don't always feel those softer utilities. I remember years ago, we bored a bunch of water services through a concrete storm sewer. And we didn't know till years later when we were TVing that storm sewer. So oftentimes they don't know what they hit. Now, typically the good actors, they do utility locates and then they pothole everywhere they cross the utility to make sure they avoid it. You know, if they don't know where those utilities are, one of those things is a sanitary sewer service, because that's not a city-owned utility. That's owned by the property owner. It's very challenging for anybody to locate that and identify where they're at. So it is incredibly challenging work to do without disturbing it. It does affect, and without a doubt, people's driveways, their landscaping, and ultimately we try and rely on the franchise signer to rectify any problems. But if they continue to not get resolution, we step in on behalf of the property owner and try and, again, entice and encourage the franchisee to make the necessary improvements and keep the property owners happy. It doesn't happen all the time. I'm very proud of the work that Andrew does in the engineering department. He knows all these people on a first name basis and is the recipient of those 10 to 15 calls per week in the summer, and meets with a lot of these folks out in front of their homes and addresses their concerns. Again, my encouragement to council would be, and we can email it to you, that one page, PDF of that one page. If somebody calls you and says, hey, what do I do? This is kind of a roadmap for what they can do. And if they continue to have problems, please encourage them to call the city engineering department. And Andrew Calling will undoubtedly be out there to help them.
Right. Any questions for Tom or Carter, Eric? Okay. Thank you.
Carter, Mayor, I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
I'm
no.
having trouble with myself. So Tom, I just was wondering, I was reading, I noticed in the memo you mentioned about there's a section of the, I think in this franchise agreement that mentions bonding is for the installers. Is that correct? Did I read that correctly?
That's what it does say. I think there's insurance. I think it's a proper use of the word surety in a bond. They do have, we do not have bonds on them based upon what Wallace updated me on this morning. So there is surety, there is an insurance company, that governs their work. That's a requirement for their work, but there's not an actual bond like we would have on a city capital construction project.
Okay. So they do, I think what I read was that if the necessary repairs weren't done for a homeowner, did I read that correctly, that the bond would, or the insurance would cover that, or did I not read that correctly?
There's a formal process. It's not very prescriptive in the franchise agreement that if after 10 days we haven't received resolution, that we can start a formal process with their insurance company. Now, it's challenging, like most bonding companies are, to get that resolved. So we continue to work with the franchisee to resolve that and not try and escalate that to an insurance company that is likely
Sure.
not located, in town. So we continue to work with those people. And again, overall, Andrew is on a first name basis with all of these people that are not necessarily all the construction people, but all these people that are leading these organizations. And again, we try and insert ourselves where people are having particular difficulty going through the kind of process and of getting a work order assigned and getting a response and getting that work done. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I just want to thank you and Andrew and your team for putting that information sheet together. I think that'll be really helpful. I've brought this up before, and I think I've fielded probably at least a half a dozen calls from constituents in Ward 2 about concerns that they have about this installation. So I think this will be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Okay, thanks for the information. Appreciate it, guys. All right, moving on right along, Radiant Resolution. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. Tonight you'll have the opportunity to consider a resolution via consent as it relates to a resolution of support, if you will, a motion of support pertaining to Radiant's pursuit of a business council grant to aid in their investment into the county. Unlike many of these that you have encountered in the past, the city of Casper is not the applicant. The Economic Development Joint Powers Board is actually the applicant, and they are simply asking for a resolution of support from the city of Casper as a neighbor to this development, if you will. And so at this point, council is not being asked for funding, nor being asked to be a co-applicant or an applicant or anything of that sort, but rather a resolution of support that would be submitted along with the application to the Business Council as they move forward from here. And so I want to take this opportunity to give you that heads up and make sure you're aware of what our true nature and involvement is with regard to this request. And of course, give you the opportunity to ask any questions as this is being contemplated for this evening. And that's really it. We do have a member of the Advanced Casper here tonight to help us with questions, should you have any. And beyond that really was the intent of this item on the pre-meeting agenda.
Any questions, comments about Radiant Resolution tonight? Go ahead, Pat.
So we noticed it was for a total of 25 million. Is that an up to? I don't know who's here from Advanced Casper, Justin. That's one question I had. And this isn't actually going directly to Radiant. So.
Mr. Mayor, to answer that broadly, and I'd be happy to defer to the actual authors of the application. You are right. This is not an improvement that Radiant will own. It's an improvement that would be owned by a public entity. Of course, Radiant would be a benefactor, as would others be, as the area in question develops further into the future and so on. If it's okay, Mr.
Absolutely.
Mayor, you can
Do you want to come up, Justin?
to expound on maybe what I just provided.
That's it, Mr. Mayor. Jump, thank you. Throw dart.
So the camera can see you.
Oh, I thought I was on the target.
Oh my God.
So the $25 million was floated by the Wyoming Business Council to entice, obviously, Radiant's location here. So Advanced Casper Economic Development Joint Powers Board is simply going along the protocol and the application process that's dictated by them. So yes, that 25 million came from the Business Council. The funding, the matching portion of that is in phases that would meet their milestones. So the first phase of that, which I had sent along to Carter, is infrastructure to the site. Once Radiant hits a milestone of testing their reactor at Idaho National Labs, then that would, and then, you know, getting high praise and moving on, that would be considered a milestone to then further development into the road, the parking area, like the additional of that 25 million. So the first real phase of that is about $8 million in infrastructure, which 1% of that is $800,000 match, which I have commitment on. So hopefully that answers your question.
Follow-ups, other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Amber.
I do want to just ask, I think there's been a lot of speculation that Radiant has access to capital to build this infrastructure themselves. What happens though if they do that and they fund that infrastructure development? Is it then available for others out in that area to develop, or like what? I don't understand like really how a utility built by a private company then functions.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the main benefactor to the majority of the water, sewer, and all that would be the community of Barnett, because it has to run through from McMurray Boulevard all the way up there. So if they were going to privately do that, if there is a way to tap into sewer and water elsewhere, that's just not, we haven't found a alternate route.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't, it has to get done
By a public entity.
Yeah, and that again, the 25 million in phases, right? So $8 million for $800,000 match to do that infrastructure opens up 600 plus acres of new commercial development for the town of Barnett, in addition to thousands of acres on the other side of Western, which is where the proposed campus is going to be. So in the next phases, that again, specific to water and sewer, I don't know how else you could restrict other development. You would have to use that. I mean, it's the most reasonable and responsible thing to do. That answers. It is very similar to Mesa, very similar to the Halo. It's basically the same type of application.
Any others?
Mayor, can you hear me?
You betcha. Yep.
Thank you. Thanks, Justin, for being there. I should probably know this since I'm our liaison to the Economic Development Joint Powers Board, so I apologize if we've covered it already. But Justin, could you remind me why the Joint Powers Board is the applicant in this case and not, say, the town of Arnunn? And how does that compare with the previous applications? I believe for the Halo project, it was the city of Casper as the applicant. Mesa, I don't know that for sure. I assumed it was the town of Evansville, but could you remind me why the Joint Powers Board is the applicant in these circumstances?
Yes, thank you for the question, Kyle. It's mostly because of the timeline dictated by the Business Council. These are already allocated funds that from legislation, the state legislature in the past. That there's obviously political risk in our current representation that perhaps that Business Council is going away. So they making that offer to Radiant for that $25 million sped up that timeline where public meetings, getting on everybody's calendar wasn't going to be feasible in the timeline for them to have enough time to review it and then get it in front of their Business Council board and then that board approving or disapproving and then it going on to SLIB. So the Economic Development Joint Powers Board, again, is a much more nimble organization and can do that much quicker. And that's why. That's primarily the reason why.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Jen? Sorry,
No.
I thought your hand was going up.
Sorry,
No, you're good.
massaging my thumb.
No. Okay, thank you, Justin.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Carter, do you have anything else? on that?
I do not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda review. Anything that you want to go over, Carter, for tonight?
Just by way of follow-up, if I could, more broadly, there were a number of questions last week pursuant to the budget discussion that we all had together, which obviously was a prolonged sort of work session on that topic. If you will keep an eye out for your information packets, both last week and this week potentially, you will see a lot of those answers materialize in that set of information. We are also, however, following up with a couple work sessions as well that I think will address some of the larger questions that you posed. Not the least of which would be, of course, priority-based budgeting, which we're going over next week, as well as a discussion both on lighting Holiday Square, which I think will be requisite of some work session time, as well as Ford Wyoming Center pro forma, which we think we believe will be ready for in a couple weeks. And so we are trying to follow up on the host of questions that occurred, but be aware that that'll take place over time versus last week and this week in total.
Okay.
And that's all.
Does anybody have any questions about tonight's meeting and the agenda? Yeah, go ahead.
No,
Okay.
not about that, but I do have a different topic if that's okay.
Yeah. Anybody else?
If
Okay.
anybody else has anything else about tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was looking at this banner, it kind of just reminded me of a situation. So do we have any, like, as far as city, I've just noticed an obscene amount of sirens lately. Has anybody, so do we know if those are actually like, what kind of ambulance sirens we're hearing when I looked at this banner form and their progress report and everything that they're doing? Is there, some of them, it seems like maybe it's just a headache and they run the sirens for advertisement, or is there an actual cause, like that's an emergency that warrants those sirens blaring at all hours? Do we have any like noise? Has anybody else noticed that? I mean, it's like an obscene, maybe because I live on 13th Street and 12. But I feel like, and I've heard from other people too, so it's not just me, but it seems like there's an ongoing. So I don't know if they have like a certain regiment or guideline for when they do run the sirens, or if, you know, like grandma has a headache and they're running the sirens to go get to her, if it's an actual emergency. I don't know if there's any context to that.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, there is a protocol that they follow as it relates to running hot, so to speak, with
Okay.
sirens and whatnot. Just like our first responders have a protocol, I suspect they have a real specific set of guidelines that they follow.
Okay.
So I doubt very seriously that ambulances would be running hot for no reason if there weren't some sort of emergent need requisite for them to be doing that.
Okay, because I heard from actual doctors, and I don't want to name names, but of who that's what they do. And so that's why I was inquiring to see if there is actually a protocol for that running hot.
I would seriously doubt it, because that puts their people at risk and.
I would
other
think,
people
well, it's the
at
same like
risk,
our
so
police services,
What'd
so
you say?
their equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah. It might just be a doctor that's upset with Banner or the hospital, possibly, but,
You have 2 minutes, Pat.
I wondered if, it was,
Been in line.
if at some point we could talk to somebody, or I could talk to somebody about what this street idea in the Yellowstone district in front, between the apartment, can't remember if that's Oak or, but in front of Kistler's, because bump outs aren't gonna work
Skyline.
and parking's gonna be strained at best down there. And water doesn't, unless that's really road to melt down about 4 inches, there's gonna be a water problem to begin with.
You want
So-
somebody to come and chat with us as a council? Is that what you're saying? Or
Or if I can get what the plan is, so that I
Architectural,
can
OID.
present it to, you know, some of the business owners down there are very concerned.
Mr. Mayor, we can certainly prepare a memo along those lines that hopefully would be informational.
That'd be great for everybody.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Is that okay, Pat? Get
Yes,
something? Okay.
And they're addressing, because I sit on that board, the OID
Oh, yeah.
Architectural Committee. And so they are addressing some of those concerns. And so that's Liz and Craig. Some others. I think Alex is on it.